All right, people, we are getting closer and closer to the end of season 1. And here we have not only another seminal, very important episode, but man, I know I said 2 episodes ago that Numbers was the best episode this season, and I think I'm still on that track, but man, do no harm. Goddamn, I forgot how good of an episode this was. And
I keep coming back every week, and it's just good every week. So I'm really enjoying this, at least this early progression.
definitely. Not to mention the fact that it's another important episode. We say goodbye to our first major main character, R.I.P. Boone Carlyle. It's been real. Thankfully, Ian Somerhalder would have a very lucrative career for the next couple of years after this, once he landed the Vampire Diaries near the end of this show's run. But for now, Boone is indeed gone. This is Talkin' Lost. Well, Luke, the island can giveth, but it can also taketh away in this instance. Now, of course, one could place the blame on Locke. You know, if Locke hadn't sent Boone up into that plane in order to try and scout it out, in order for their seemingly mindless attempt to open the hatch, then who would have known? But as we saw at the end of last week's episode, Locke was definitely suffering from a lot of guilt in that sense because his faith definitely took him in the wrong direction. And in this episode, it shows there are consequences as to when you meddle around with fate. The other reason why this episode works so well and is in competition with Numbers for me as far as being the best episode of the season is because this is one of the few episodes where it is fast, it is in real time, every minute counts, there's not a single wasted moment, not a single wasted subplot, not to mention the fact that, again, we don't get as much of a backstory. It's another Jack backstory, but the backstory is not necessarily to inform, but rather to complement. I think this is one of the few episodes so far where the backstory is not the focus. It's everything that's on the island is really the focus here, because this is the first, major incident that they've had on the island, probably since the pilot, if I had to guess. You know, obviously you had the whole Ethan sub-arc, but, you know, they resolved that one relatively quickly once Claire came back, because... So the two major things that are dictating this episode, Jack is desperately attempting to save Boone's life after Locke carried him back to camp after he was grievously injured in the plane that fell last week. And also conveniently at the same time, Claire is having her baby. She goes into, she's runs into the group that's working on the boat. She's like, "Oh, I'm fine," even though it's clearly something is not fine. And then when Kate is trying to help Jack find supplies in order to help him out with Boone, she runs into Claire and she is giving birth. So already, lots of crazy intense action right here in this episode.
Yeah, it's just a very well written, executed episode. It could just be Jack trying to save Boone, but no, you have to put him in a more challenging, compelling scenario where he also has to indirectly help Claire deliver the baby, which was another sort of thing that we were just waiting for. We were waiting for her son to be revealed that she speaks English. We were waiting for the hatch to something to happen. That happened last episode. Now we finally get Claire going to labor and giving birth to the baby. So just everything happening at once, but you can keep track of it, and it's a challenge for the characters, which is great to watch.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, they're resolving a lot of kind of overhanging plot arcs that have been building up throughout the season. In this episode, like I said, we've only got 2 more episodes after this. Well, 3 until we get to the finale, the 3-part finale entitled Exodus, which is going to be another big one. But for now, yeah, it's like I said, it's very intense. It's very it's very in real time. And once again, the thing that makes Lost good, it's character-driven, not plot-driven, because obviously, despite the fact that Jack is a little too hell-bent on saving Boone, he's also having flashbacks to his wedding day as well, which is the last moment when he was kind of getting cold feet. It's kind of getting more so into Jack's hero complex and how complex of a lead character he is. You know, it's interesting because I've talked about how by this point, we're in 2005 at this point of the show. So we've already had the era of, interesting and complex, different sort of lead characters. Tony Soprano, Al Swearingen on Deadwood, Jimmy McNulty on The Wire. This is also the same time that House premiered, Dr. House on network.
I've been watching that. It's like
It's
whenever I need
entertaining,
something
seems.
in the background, not too much focus, I just put on like
Yeah,
Hugh
that
Laurie
seems to be
is
the
amazing.
yeah, that seems to be the focus here. We're only a couple years removed from Don Draper and Walter White entering the scene, so it's interesting to see Jack's role in that canon of lead characters of complex leading men, especially given that obviously this is a network TV show, and also how I would say that compared to the rest of those guys, Jack is a relatively good, for the most part, stable character. Obviously, we see that he's got his issues, but it is quite interesting how Jack's biggest flaw continues to be his hero complex, to the point where even though that's allowed him to save lives, it's as his dad says in the flashback, he gets a little bit too committed to things. And sometimes that can be at other people's behest, where we discover in this episode he's doing everything he can for Boone. He resets his leg properly. He's having Son help him. What's it called? He's, trying to figure out blood types. He's literally draining himself of his blood in order to try and save Boone. And then he gets to the point where he's going to cut Boone's leg off because he realizes that his diagnosis was wrong, because, he was told that he fell off a cliff, but when Boone wakes up, he is just barely in his fugue state able to get out, that they were in a plane with Locke. They were trying to open the hatch, and when the plane fell, something crushed his leg. So Jack's been operating this all wrong this entire time and going off of wrong information. So that's another thing.
I think it was Jack that realized that it wasn't like he didn't land on it. It was crushed. Like it was something, some blood clot, some medical thing.
Right. But
I'm not sure.
You heard Boone.
But then afterwards, yeah, he was kind of like a hatch plane something.
Oh, I thought that was before Jack realized that his leg was crushed.
I'm not sure. I watched it a few days ago.
Yeah,
it doesn't quite matter.
Yeah, something in there timeline wise. But yeah, so obviously, yeah, you can make the argument that, maybe if Jack had the right information to begin with, then maybe he would have saved Boone's life. Sure, you could make that argument, but ultimately that's not what this episode is about, and that's not what it's trying to say. It's trying to say that Jack is kind of hyper obsessing over it so much, when in reality, it's like at the end of the day, what he should have done is, at the end of the day, realize that, there's nothing he could have done for Boone after a certain point. He should have gone and helped Claire deliver the baby, especially with the revelation that comes. I don't know when that revelation is coming about Jack's connection to Claire. I won't reveal it yet, but like I said, all I'm going to say is there's a reason why Christian was in Australia when he died. And
I'm thinking they were all in Australia for a reason.
They all were in Australia for a reason. But I'm talking about Jack's dad, Christian, who was there in Australia before or around the same that a majority of them were there. So obviously, like timeline wise, we know that Christian was there when Sawyer was there, but Jack, I'm assuming, was the last one to go, because he didn't go until he found out that Christian had died, which we can assume was sometime after he met up with Sawyer. So obviously, Jack should have been with Claire delivering the baby, but it's the fact that he has to kind of deliver instructions to Claire via Charlie and Jin in order to help her deliver it. And obviously Claire's going through her little snafu as well, where she's like, I'm really worried. I didn't want the baby. I wanted to give it away. Babies are babies know that stuff. And obviously Kate has to talk her through it. And I love how, I will say too, though, it was definitely a little bit of a fuck you from Jack to Kate, I should say, when he's like, Kate, you have to be the one to deliver this baby. It's like, I said, like, Kate, take some goddamn responsibility for once, which I just think is hilarious. But I will say too that there's a little moment from Sawyer here. So, like I said, we don't see Locke or the Hatch in this episode at all. It's only like hinted at.
Like there's crises all over the island.
Yeah, exactly. They're kind of busy dealing with Boone and Claire. Also, Saeed and Shannon are just off having a picnic somewhere on the other side of the island conveniently. Like I said, I love Saeed, but man, I forgot what a waste of time it was for him getting involved with Shannon in this episode after he came back from meeting Russo. But what's it called? So obviously, yeah, but in the midst of it, when Kate gets the alcohol from Sawyer, he rightfully points out, it's like, oh, really? That him and Boone and Locke hunting that boar that they never seem to bring back, so already started to hint to the fact that, like, all right, the other Islanders are definitely aware that something was going on there, that they were not indeed hunting for boar every day. But yeah, so like I said, some big thematic moments that that obviously we get covered in this episode. I think the biggest one, like I said, Damon Lindelof's obsession with death and the ambiguity that surrounds it, right? And how there's a reason why he's always exploring that in sort of a mythical sense, like the supernatural dealings on the island, the idea of what actually happened during the Great Departure in The Leftovers, you know? Even to a certain extent, everything that goes on with Dr. Manhattan and Watchmen, Lindelof is always obsessed with this idea of death and what actually happens during it. And there's a reason why also he chooses very precariously that in the same episode that we lose Boone, we get Claire's baby Aaron. So kind of, you know, this whole where there is death, there is also life thing, this whole kind of idea of reincarnation that we also know happens somewhat on the island. The island has saved people as well that it's deemed worthy. When Jack was able to successfully magically resuscitate Charlie, Locke obviously getting the use of his legs back. So, like I said, there's a reason why I say the island can give it, but it can also take it away. Because in this instance, you notice how, too, like, if Jack had cut off the leg, there's a chance that he could have saved Boone. But, when he, temporarily comes back at the end, right before he goes, he's like, I'm all meshed up inside, just let me go. So there's this whole, it's very interesting where, you know, you see that sometimes happen, where it's, people, on the verge, and they could come back and they could not, and they make that willing, conscious choice to go, you know, and they're like, even if I live, even if I survive, they kind of have to make this common rationale, will it be worth it, you know, and Boone makes the choice where it's not worth it. And so obviously, again, as we learn more and more about the island as the show goes on, you know, and we discover that, again, they do confirm it is not purgatory. They are not dead at all, but the island may or may not, you know, be some sort of conduit, let's say, between that as well as we get into, you know, especially once we get into the later seasons as far as breaking it down. So I just wanted your thoughts on that.
Yeah, the Boone telling Jack to let him go because Jack wasn't gonna let go himself. He needed that outside influence because
Right.
you know we saw in the flashback. Shout out Claire Dunphy from Modern Family.
Julie Bowen.
Like, whoa!
Yeah,
I saw her in the credits and Julie Bowen. Like, whoa! What is Claire doing here? I'm guessing there's still gonna be some actors I recognize.
Yep. Yes, there will.
In guest roles. But yeah, for a few episodes, I was wondering okay, Jack's the default character, but he's not really getting that development. Not usually in TV, but in other things, the main character sometimes is the lesser interesting one compared to a side character. But this episode made sure to catch us up on that, how he fixed. I'm just gonna call her Claire because I don't remember her name.
Yeah, I don't remember her name either. Sarah, I think is her name. It doesn't matter. Just call her Claire. She's Claire.
Yeah, because they crashed into each other or something.
Well, no. So if I'm remembering correctly, like I said, so they haven't gotten into this specific episode yet because Jack's backstory bounces around kind of all over the place. But if I'm remembering correctly, no, she was. She was in a really, really bad car accident that would have paralyzed her. She was on the verge of dying, and Jack thought that in surgery he screwed up and caused her to be paralyzed for life, but instead he actually saved her. And so there's kind of this questionable ambiguity of whether or not he did save her. And so that's kind of the source of conflict that he has as far as that goes, where he's like, oh, did I actually save her, you know?
Yeah, and that kind of drives his hero savior complex. He has to save Boone, he has to help Claire, he has this self-responsibility placed onto himself. So that really,
you could also break it down to it's the Socratic oath as well that he took as a doctor, but really, it's the hero complex thing.
Yeah. So, but hey, he's the leader. He's got to do the leader things.
But it's still so interesting as far as that goes, where he, even now, after all this time, he is still the reluctant leader. He obviously, when it comes to doctor duties, he snaps into doctor mode. But for the most part, again, it still takes him a while before he realizes, no, this is what I have to do. And again, you notice, it really isn't until he finds out that Locke was somehow involved with what happened to Boone that he kind of is like, all right, time to take charge out now, you know? Because remember, when the Ethan thing happened, that was really Saeed leading the charge and planning, you know? Locke's kind of been the one to constantly pull them back from the edge and keep them somewhat organized, you know? So this is real. The other reason why this episode is so crucially important, besides everything that we talked about, is this is really the moment where Jack starts becoming the leader, you know? Up until this point, yeah, okay, he's credited as lead, but notice, obviously, the cast members are listed off in the opening credits. I don't think I've seen this with many other shows. The cast members are listed off in the opening credits in alphabetical order. You know, they usually always start with, like, who's credited first. Like, with The Wire, they always credited Dominic West before everybody else. And I would argue that Jimmy McNulty is even less of a lead character in that show than Jack is in this show, you know? But in this show, like, Matthew Fox is credited in alphabetical order with the rest of the cast. But obviously, Jack is credited as the main character. But also, if you go all the way back to the beginning, originally in the original pilot, Jack was supposed to die in the pilot when it was originally going to be Michael Keaton playing him, and then Kate was supposed to take over. And then obviously things shifted. And I think that's another part of the reason why Kate's probably had some of the weakest episodes this season, is because they definitely had to do a lot of course correcting. And then unintentionally, Jack actually ended up becoming a really interesting lead character, which again, almost never happens on network shows. The leading guy is usually always the least interesting one. So it's another one of those instances of like network TV kind of all working in congruence to actually work to its benefit. But whatever the case is, this is the moment where Jack starts becoming the leader. This is the moment where Jack really starts stepping up and being like, okay, I need to take charge of these guys, you know? And also, I got to give a shout out to Michael Giacchino, the score composer, because this is where we get his iconic Lost theme, Life and Death, which plays at the end after Boone is gone, after Claire is showing Aaron off to the rest of the survivors, after Shannon finds out and is crying over Boone's corpse. That really infamous score that plays at some very, very crucial moments, some very important big Lost moments later on.
I'll have to listen to it again just to keep it in my head.
It's one of the best, and it's kind of another one of those staples of Lost fandom that has become so well known. And yeah, it's I'll admit the tears don't well up for Boone, but they will well up at a later point in one season 3 finale that all of us Lost fans know is coming for anyone who knows about Not Penny's Boat. But yeah, great episode. Really, really good episode. It's going to be tough to beat. Like I said, we've only got 3 more weeks of episodes. So next week is The Greater Good, which is Saeed's second solo episode. Then we get Born to Run, another Kate backstory. Okay. But then the trade-off is the week after that, we're doing Exodus, the 3-part season 1 finale, which I believe this is the only 3-part season finale. Like, that's how big and successful this was. Every other finale after this is 2 parts, or until we get to the series finale, the end, which is just one long movie, essentially. So,
and the flashbacks continue throughout the series, right?
The flashbacks do continue for the first 3 seasons, and then at the end of season 3, going into season 4, to signify the halfway point of the show, there's a shift, and that's all I'm gonna say for now.
Okay.
But for the next 2 seasons, we do get flashbacks as we get.
You can only do so many flashbacks,
right? Well, I mean, we do get new characters added in seasons 2 and 3.
Yeah.
But for the most part, yeah, it's just the next 2 seasons.
Yeah, it's like you can only do so much backstory. Like, he was in Australia, he went to a bar one day. Like,
yeah, exactly. And like I said, how they've structured the backstory. So like I said, there's still a lot of other the biggest ones that still need backstory. Kate, I'll admit, her biggest backstory comes at the beginning of season 2. Jack has a couple of more things. I'll admit, Jack probably gets a little bit too much, but Jack still has some more crucially important ones. And Locke and Saeed both still have some crucially important ones that are coming. Sawyer,
well, you mentioned one thing about Locke that we are yet to see.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, like I said, we saw him lose a kidney, but we still have not seen how he gets paralyzed. I told you how he gets paralyzed because I realized that it happened in the background when we were watching numbers, but I didn't realize it until after the fact. But yeah, like I said, we still have a lot more. Like I said, we still have a couple more connections to establish. We have to establish the connection between Jack and Claire. Yeah, a couple more things. Like I said, especially because the biggest thing is as far as new sets of characters, we get the tail end members of the Survivor. So there are other survivors from the plane that settled on another part of the island after the crash. And then there are, obviously, once we get into more of the others, you know, because the others not only become this, like, kind of strange supernatural force, but they actually become characters. We actually start to get to know them as well. So there's kind of all of that to take into consideration as well. Like I said, so it may seem like we covered a lot in season 1. Oh, there's so much more. Oh, there's so much more to the lore of the show that we need to get into. So, with that being said, Luke, only 3 weeks left. You excited?
I said after this episode, I'm the most amped to watch the next episode with the Jack. Where are you going to find John Locke?
To find John Locke, exactly. He's a man on a mission now, like the man of science versus man of faith has begun. The conflict has begun. That will officially be solidified in the season 2 premiere. So with that being said, Luke, thanks once again for coming on back to back. You can also find him on our top 10 worst of 2024 episode that we did last week. Where can the good people follow you on the interwebs?
They can follow me at Luke Reviews on YouTube. Top 10 of the year should be within the month, this January month. One assignment this week, and I can get to it. Not a great year, not a great top 10, but I always make the most of it.
Yes, always make do. Exactly. And of course, you guys can follow me with everything going on at Movie Nerd Reviews across all platforms, at Official Talkin TV Podcast across all platforms. Be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, follow us on Twitch, all of that good stuff. And as always, people, 12 seasons in a short film, and get lost. We'll see you next week.